Oh, okay.
And that's an interesting way to start the episode. Welcome to the Rovertime Podcast, episode 24. Going to be talking about a bunch of stuff today. We have a lot of people, which I'm kind of surprised by, because a half hour ago we were not sure we were going to have enough people. If everyone can would introduce themselves. We'll start from the left and work over. I think that starts with you, Fry.
Crow.
Hey, what's up? Sorry.
Guess that counts.
All right, yeah. Moving on. Go.
Ryan.
Hey, how's it going?
How's it going? We got Sirius and AAA with us too. All right, let's get right into it. Our first story of the day. Richard Spencer. We were supposed to have Charlottesville 2.0. Everyone puffed it up. Literally everybody was waiting for something huge to go down, and like 10 people in an auditorium yelled at Richard Spencer for an hour, and like 10,000 media people went to go film the events around it.
I have a question about Richard Spencer.
Shoot.
So, last I checked, which was granted months ago, even before the Charlottesville stuff, I thought he was an ethno-nationalist, which is not exactly a white supremacist like he's being billed everywhere.
That is true. I mean, Roaming interviewed him. A bunch of other people did, and he has been very consistent. He's a non-violent white ethno-nationalist who does not want anyone to be killed and doesn't believe in white supremacy. He believes they have higher IQs, but yeah, I'm not so sure how he became a white nationalist either, or not a white nationalist, a white supremacist in the media eyes, but, you know, happens.
All right, cool. Glad I wasn't mistaken.
Yeah, no, the way he approaches things, it can throw you for a loop, because in my head, he sort of fits into the category of that really cool Mormon guy who has some weird views but articulates them really well. So it's like watching the dad from Big Love trying to explain racial hierarchies, and you're like, but dude, if you were to take any of what you said and just instead of saying, you know, we're better because we're X or Y race, but rather we could work together to make sure that the future is good for everybody, suddenly he'd be the most wholesome person in the world. And so how does he justify his position internally, yet still act the way he acts?
You know what I find interesting as a tangent, speaking of some races being better than others, as we all know is true.
Oh my.
The new South Park game, you know, the difficulty setting, you could choose your race. That's the difficulty. The hardest difficulty is you're black.
Oh my god.
So here's the thing. I don't think Spencer really, the way he articulates his argument is that he doesn't believe that whites are better than blacks and Asians are better than whites, even though that's what the stats would say. He simply believes that people do better when they are surrounded by people of their own ethnicity. And that when they have systems that involve people of their own ethnicities, they are more harmonious, and so they produce better outcomes. And that is what, in turn, makes the numbers turn out the way they do, where Asians almost completely, especially where they're very successful, are very homogenous and in large numbers, and they have large governments and that all work together because all the people are fundamentally the same on a biological level. Whites were the same way, and to a lesser extent still are, but then you have blacks who have a lot of intermarriage and a lot of outside influences on their culture. So that he very much is against colonialization and those practices because they were detrimental to black people, especially in Africa. So he agrees with social justice warriors insofar as that was a really bad thing for black people. So he makes the same argument, which is, debatable, but probably not completely without merit.
The other thing which is weird, so he argues for ethno-homogeneity, and if you're going to go after him, you actually have to go after him on okay, now even in regions where we say that in terms of race you have similar peoples, there's still a whole bunch of different groups going on. And I think he makes the mistake of generalizing to the entire ethnicity what is more true about particular groups of it. This is why I really like the YouTuber Just Thinking Out Loud. She's from the Caribbean, and so she always talks about what's going on with African American culture, and she gets the most pushback from that part of African American culture. And it's like, so his argument, I think, runs short, and no one's actually hit him on that to the degree I'd like to see them.
Well, that's, I think, because so the people that he talks to generally are receptive enough to what he's saying that they want to hear his whole argument. And he spends so much time fighting upstream to just not be called a white supremacist that he never really gets it out there. Even with, roaming, and there were a couple other people who interviewed him who were very friendly. But it took so much of the conversation to get past the, oh yeah, I'm not a neo-Nazi, to even get to, hey, this is what I believe. So he's only just starting to get into the point where he can even talk about anything better than that, or anyone can come up with a better argument against him.
You should go on Crowder show.
God, that would be actually awesome to see. Crowder would be abrasive enough to him to have a real conversation with him about it, and would push back.
Fair, so I think it would be a good idea overall. That's how he was with what's her face last time. I can't remember her name. But I mean, be a eye opener at least, hopefully.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. He's willing to talk to anybody and everyone, and he doesn't evade much in his conversations. But most people aren't willing to really just accept that he's not a neo-Nazi long enough to have a real conversation with him. So he gets into these really adversarial conversations, or he gets into the really super, like, let's try to be nice to this guy so that, people think that we're open to debate.
Now, AAA was talking about his discussion with Naomi Wolf, who's a very well-known feminist author.
Yeah, thank you. Yep. That was a good discussion. Even when I disagreed, it was good.
Yeah.
Would you like to elaborate?
Sorry?
Would you like to elaborate on the discussion?
Oh, okay. There's a lot of lag on this end a little bit. Sorry, it's not always clear who's talking. Yeah, no, it was a good interview since I had heard of her. I think from Crowder a while ago, and then it was I think she wrote an article or book or something, and he was just going off of trying to. He interviewed her and saying, hey, I've seen some of your work, and I just want to let you know I agree on some and disagree on others, and like they had a lot of things in common in the beginning, and then towards the end it was just a few facts that I guess someone got wrong. It sounded like Stephen had a lot of good hey, you think that this, but in reality this happened, and I mean it was the right way to have a disagreement over hey, here are the facts, and then both probably pretty open to going back and saying, hey, I'm going to Google XYZ, and maybe you're right, maybe I'm wrong. And luckily, he called her out on, hey, you believe in this statistic, or that for one informant of rape, or whatever. What about the women's wage and that kind of thing. So it was a good. He didn't really attack her. He just more said, that's an interesting factoid, but if you look at it this way, and so he's very good at being fair and asking the what if and are you sure kind of question. So it was if you guys haven't seen it, I definitely encourage you guys to go watch the interview.
I'll have to check that out. All right, so moving on. The other major political story this week was the Trump phone call that I guess we don't actually have audio on, even though a bunch of news sources published a phone call that he had with a family of a fallen service member. I guess that was a different phone call. But supposedly he said that, he knew what he was signing up for. And the tone of it was apparently not in the consoling way, I guess, is the accusation. And I saw a blurb on Engadget today about how I guess he asked a general to lie about that, or forced him to, and now it's a story that keeps growing. I cannot figure out for the life of me what is true about this anymore or not. So if anybody else has more information than that, feel free to try to educate us.
Family member that actually had an article posted about he called, or the wife or someone said he actually was trying to be sincerely apologetic or whatever. Again, I could be wrong. That's what I thought happened.
I've read blurbs from both ways, and I can't I feel like there's a lot of people just injecting their own view on it.
All right, so here's probably the fairest overview. According to what John Kelly talked about, is originally when Trump got into office, or maybe it was, the first casualty of war, not really sure. And he made the decision that, he'd like to call the families if he can. So he asked General Kelly about, how's the best way to make these calls? And so Kelly said, well, honestly, sir, I recommend you don't do it because it sucks, essentially. But
sense.
Regardless, Trump decided to do it anyway. And Kelly told him to tell the families what he would tell the families, which is along the lines of they knew what they signed up for and they were exactly where they wanted to be when they lost their lives. So naturally, that's what Trump told him, but in a more Trumpian fashion, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, that sentiment. When I heard the quote at first, I was like, "Well, so what if he said that? He knew what he was signing up for, and he went out and did it anyways." That's a pretty cliched trope, right? Like that's what you tell the members of fallen service people.
And so, here's the thing. I'm sure Trump, when he made the call, he was very sincere about it. And that's exactly what he intended to say. What he actually said, I don't know. Obviously, we don't have audio. We do have the widow saying he was insensitive, which it could be just because it's, from my understanding from hearing several vets' positions on it, is they don't really like to hear that from someone who is not themselves a vet, if that makes sense. Like, it sounds condescending to them from someone who's not also in the service. But if they're in the service, then it's fine. Just kind of an interesting psychological thing or whatever.
Basically, I really just don't care.
Well, Crow, you don't care about a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
Crow, you did much for that? Yeah, I'm triggered now.
There's no way of proving it. No.
But
I heard the audio too. There was audio released in the news.
It wasn't for this particular call. The audio was for a call a few months ago, which, as far as I can tell, was frankly excellent.
Yeah, that's what I heard, and that's what I saw, and I was like, oh, well, so that was a total non-story now. And I'm glad I didn't like go out, because I had a bunch of Facebook feed was filling up with people like, oh, he disrespected a service member family and all that, and I'm like, I'm glad I didn't respond, because this is the thing where the media is going both ways with it.
Well, I don't think anyone can legitimately say that Trump is in any way has any animus toward the military or veterans. I don't think you can say that truthfully.
Yeah, that seems silly. Like when you put it that way, like it doesn't seem like something he would want. Like there's no upside for him.
It's like, yeah, Trump is not going to call the family of a fallen soldier and be like, you know what, this guy, stupid, or something like that.
I mean, actually, to be fair, I could actually see Trump doing that. I could totally see him, like starting the phone call great and having like, bereaved widow, just, being like, fuck you, you killed my husband, and then him going full Trump mode and just like laying it. Like that is an image in my mind I could actually see happening, man.
Okay, but the fact of the matter is he didn't. And the congressman or the congresswoman Federica Wilson, who is from Florida, was in the car with Trump when he made the call and decided to try to make a political statement out of it, and this is what comes of it. And because she was so far in the wrong, naturally she's had to become even more shrill and has since accused Trump's entire administration of being white supremacists. So I don't think anybody in their right minds is taking her seriously anymore.
Is this another case of like congressman from a small district wants to stand up to the White House?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, there's a reason they call it the White House, am I right? But
She's so pressed.
Oh dear. A couple things. I'm not sure if I'm on base with this, but I was listening to Ben Shapiro, and he was saying that there's sort of a complication with this where Trump may have opened himself up indirectly because the events that happened in Niger have been something which the military hasn't come out about, and so people have been staying relatively quiet. Then Trump acknowledged this person's death, and in doing so kind of jumped the shark from the military's perspective. And so this is why they're trying to turn it into his version of, what was the event that Hillary Clinton was so intimately tied to? Benghazi?
Benghazi, yeah. But the thing is, this wasn't a secret operation as far as I'm aware. It was just not, well, I don't think it ever really was.
Well, fair enough.
Because it was, I mean, they're just regular Marines.
It's also, I mean, this wasn't a terrorist attack or a surprise thing. This was an offensive operation, as far as I understood. But
and it's, I mean, they acknowledge what it is right away. It's pretty different from Benghazi. Now, where Trump opened himself up to criticism is as he does, because he doesn't speak in the language of government. He's when he was accused of being insensitive and saying, what he did, he responded with, "Oh, I didn't say that." Now, what he meant is, "I didn't mean that," but he doesn't do government speak very well. So that's where the media jumped on him, is like, "Oh, he's denied he said this," and it's like, well, no, anyone rational is like, "Oh, well, no, he just meant, I didn't mean that," because that's what everybody would say.
yeah, that sounds more like what it is, but
It's the media jumping on something small because, they hate him.
But the story itself is being drowned beneath the enormity of what's been going on with the Hollywood scandal and, trading sexual favors for parts or being required to provide sexual services for parts. So
I find that interesting because now this week we had Vox, a Vox executive, and they're the owner of NeoGaf, both with their own sexual harassment issues. Both seem to be pretty not serious allegations. The NeoGaf one especially seems to have been a very disproportionate response.
Could you explain for the retarded of us what NeoGaf is?
I think this came out This came out 48 hours ago, so I'm not surprised to know people missed it. Actually, I think it was last night I heard about it first. But he apparently got into a shower with a employee after they went out drinking on Bourbon Street. When she claims she didn't make any, there's nothing provocative about what she was doing. She just, I guess, vomited on herself or something, or gotten dirty on bourbon and needed a shower, and he got in with her uninvited. And then there was a butt grabbing incident. And for those accusations, NeoGaf is burning in flames now. He's basically shut down the site. All the admins and moderators and everything from the site have started leaving the sinking ship. Earlier this year, he had a $10 million offer for the site. I doubt that would still be a thing that would happen. So he was a major offer. He was one of those avowed male feminists who kicked. What's his name? Brain fart. The rotund man who just had stomach bypass surgery. Boogie.
That would be what's his name? Oh,
Boogie,
shoot, yeah.
Yeah. He kicked Boogie off of NeoGaf because he wouldn't fervently come out in support of the anti-Gamergate groups and the other news like that. Even though Boogie was very middle of the road, along with other YouTube gaming personalities who were all like, there's some accuracy here, but we're not going to talk about women too much. But he definitely was on the anti-Gamergate side of that whole incident in a very large way and helped create a lot of pushback and get alternative forums for a lot of people to talk about gaming. And now, apparently, he's not so respectful of women. Though, again, no charges, no actual accusations, not a whole lot of information, but his site is probably dead, at least for the time being. Which, the Vox one is also just an allegation, but it hasn't seemed to have had nearly as much fallout. But the trope of male feminist does something untoward with women in their employ is certainly becoming a little stronger this week.
As far as the whole Hollywood meltdown goes, I'm going to say I am extremely unsurprised because there's stories of this dating back to like the 40s. It's not a new thing.
Right.
The casting couch has been going on forever.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, so how much of that is of a self-fulfilling prophecy type of deal, where they sort of created this narrative of, oh, everyone does it, so a few people get away with it, and then all of a sudden it becomes a little more prominent because the people coming into that industry are attracted to that idea.
My father.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, no, that's one of those ones where it definitely is a rabbit hole, which we're probably going to get more and more coming out of.
Really?
But like we talked about last week, there seems to be a lot of tacit understandings that are going on. And through them, this is basically normalized practices. Now, it's probably been normalized, as you say, for so long that no one even blinks an eye at it. But the thing is, people who have benefited from the system, I think, are invested in trying to minimize the damage, because otherwise you might go back and say, why was this person cast if we look at who the cast list was, other than they might have provided sexual favors or have been taken advantage of. So it makes everyone's decision process at the high up level kind of insidious by proxy.
True.
Yeah, it's true. It's also kind of sad to see Hollywood go down in flames with the sex scandal and with their general movies and as for the past few years.
This year has been especially bad for the box office.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's been terrible.
Worse than.
Has anyone seen the movie recently?
I just went to go see Kingsman. It was good, but
I've seen a bunch of movies
probably
this year, but I like watching movies, so there's that.
Yeah, this year there was, so.
There also wasn't a headliner Marvel movie this year, but to balance that out, you had Wonder Woman that way outperformed, and you're going to have Star Wars.
There's going to be
there's Guardians
and Ragnarok.
Yeah.
Guardians 2 did better than its predecessor, but Guardians has never been a tentpole for Marvel even, so it's always been a happy surprise when it does well.
They've both been fantastic movies so far, though.
Yeah, definitely very good. And then Ragnarok's coming out next week, or 2 weeks, I guess, in the U.S., and then they still have Star Wars to finish out. So odds are really, really good that this year is not actually going to be all that bad box office-wise, but it's all going to be Disney, with Warner Brothers getting that one lucky win. And it's literally... Wonder Woman.
It'll be interesting to see if Justice League does well.
It will be, especially with the tonal shift they're probably going to have coming after Wonder Woman's success. So,
well, also after the director change, because Snyder's out, and
we did a lot of it already. Then, so I don't think we're going to get a lot of.
Joss Whedon was helping a lot, and also Ben Affleck said he was more involved. But now that he's been involved in this whole sex scandal thing,
it's too late in the pipe. Yeah, it's too late in the pipe, and he's still the new Batman. So, and he's really good at that. I don't think that Warner Brothers is going to be willing to get rid of him because there's no concrete allegations of anything in the recent past. The video of him with on the MTV show, it's like, well,
right.
It's MTV, and it's like a 25-year-old Ben Affleck. Like, yeah, shocker that this happened. Like, I guess, is that a thing? Like, do we look at this as like, oh, that's a 25-year-old dude with like a young woman? Is that vastly more acceptable? Does it become?
I actually had no idea what he was actually accused of. I just knew that he was accused, and his name kept coming up along with Weinstein. So,
It was
Basically, he was creepy. That's all.
Yeah, that's a lot of these. A lot of this sort of like brewing. Oh, there's sexual stuff rampant everywhere. Is a lot of like, oh, he's a sleazebag and he tried to take me to a hotel room. There's nothing actually illegal per se. Like even a lot of this stuff is not even assault, really, sexual or otherwise. Like there's definite. Well, could have gone either way. Were you inviting it? No, and like they backed off when they were told. Some of them are a little more serious, but it's all so wishy-washy, and it's all so far removed in time that you don't know. So,
except for, of course, Weinstein himself.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Weinstein, once again, I said it last week. I'll say it till the end of time. The worst thing you can do is admit anything or apologize ever. Literally, nobody who has ever apologized in these scenarios has ever come away better for it.
And of course, his big thing is like, oh, just need to go spend more time with my therapist. It's like, nah, I think you just need a conscience, boy.
Right. God, yeah, that apology was just a cringe. Like, that apology was just wrong in so many ways because, A, he admitted to doing a bunch of stuff, like, not anything in specific. So basically, anyone that wanted to reads that as, I capitulate to all of these things. He basically entered no contest for all the allegations against him, including rape. So...
originally, remember, he tried spinning it as like it's a right-wing conspiracy. So it's like
that only works for Hillary, and even then, only with limited success.
Well, the thing as well is it taints people by proxy, because now imagine you're someone who's come out and said, yes, I was a victim of Harvey Weinstein, and then you have to go and cast for another movie, and somebody gets picked ahead of you, and then you go, oh, they picked that person because, and then they have to sit and think and go, oh yeah, they're a better actor than me. My entire career is completely false.
And basically,
did you see the breakdown where, I forget where I saw it, but apparently in the last, I forget what year it was, but since, I think it was for the last 20 years in the Oscars, Weinstein's been thanked more often than God.
oh my God.
It was, they like researched that, and it's like he was thanked like, I don't know, 50 or 60 more times than God, and it's like,
Thanks for masturbating in front of me, Weinstein. Thank you. Oh my God.
I mean, to be
Your
fair,
semen is so delicious.
have you seen the direct that he's been putting out? I think Weinstein definitely had more to do with that than God, at least in any world I want to live in.
Well, it's also one of those things where they were clearly acknowledging something more. So Jennifer Lawrence's speech is going to come back and bite her in the butt. Thankfully, it deserves to, where she goes, Harvey, I don't know who you had to kill to make this movie. And now I take euphemism as sleep with, but thank you for doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Hollywood's full of sleazebags. This is why I don't watch movies. I don't want to give these people money. That and the fact that they're anti-Second Amendment. So
that and the fact that you just don't want to spend money.
No, I spent money on movies before, but then once I realized just how anti-Second Amendment Hollywood is, I just stopped watching movies.
That's true.
Well,
Right.
it does say something that the adult film industry is a lot more honest about what they want to do with fresh-faced young people than Hollywood is.
Oh yeah, come on their faces.
Adult movie. I gotta research the adult movie scene.
But that's the thing. The adult film industry has to be more honest with it because it is just so much more exposed. They're not about producing something fake. Ironically, they're about producing something, with a very visceral entertainment value, and they just accept that. And if they don't, they fail. It is incredibly marketistic as well. Either you sell porn or you don't. There is no artistic award for great porn. I mean, I guess the AVNs are there, but they don't make artsy porn films. They make high budget. Yeah, they make high budget porn films to sell more of those films. And for studio, credentials. So this is the thing. At the end of the day, I guess the porn industry is actually better than Hollywood on legitimately all fronts. They're better at servicing their customers. They're better at making their stated art. and they're more honest with their employees, and probably have less STDs overall than actual Hollywood.
And probably a lower divorce rate too.
That actually might be true. Oh my god.
Wow. Yeah, they're literally fucked over. It's great.
So, moving on. Wow, I don't even know how to segue out of this.
Don't try. Just moving on. In other gaming news this week, it just was published today. I will link this in the chat here. Massively Overpowered decided to post up a article about should MMO guilds use trigger warnings. And we were actually talking about this before it went live, and it is as cringy as you could possibly think. Everyone remembers Gamergate and like how they had all these articles that you were just like, why would you have this discussion? And this is another one of those, them trying to gin it back up again a little bit. Why would you? How can you have trigger warnings for something that is unscripted and unplanned in conversation?
Reasons.
Virtue signal. Someone get the virtue signal because we need social justice, man.
Is it like the bat signal?
Yeah. The hero nobody wanted and no one asked for.
See, for me, this I play Eve. I'm pretty big into it, and like we have a lot of stuff involving this kind of thing where we have structured rules about our groups. Our guilds and the larger organizations they belong to, they have lots of rules about interactions, what you do, especially in-game, a little bit out-of-game, and a little bit on services. So you're on comms with people. People that are productive, they produce for everybody else. They make content for the whole group. They get respect. And it doesn't particularly matter if what they are in real life or if they are in a special group. I know this because we have a couple transgendered women in our group who are FCs. They run stuff. They do fleets, and they get defended when people try to give them shit about that. And this is a group of 30 to 40-year-old, dominated by men. Almost like a good, I'd say, a third to a half of the population is all veterans or first responders. Like that is a very core group of players on this game, and that's what I see. And I can't imagine the idea of having someone unironically say trigger warning before any conversation I've ever heard in any group I've been in that context. Much less something like an FPS or Destiny or something like that.
They already did the Call of Duty.
Go ahead, AAA.
Oh, I was just going to say that was the I know because I have it now. They had the same censoring for. I have Zombie Chronicles on my PS4, and they have. It's not like hugely there, but I can definitely tell where they've made certain pictures aren't there, and certain power-ups. It's just kind of like things that made the game seem. I don't say better, but more legitimate. They just took them away because now it's blank. Now it's actually looking a lot of boring tiles or just pictures that just start to look off because they had the Nazi symbol there. And yeah, this is great. We're gonna have this symbol, and I'm like. Yeah, now it doesn't make any sense, and I don't really care, but why did you change this? And now, I mean, I've even heard, like you saying, Destiny and Call of Duty, they're trying to do more, it didn't say trigger warning, but there's more,
Oh, you have the Kakistani DLC, or not DLC, but skins that they had. And we see it. That's from the developer side, which I get why corporations take a very quick response and say, nope, we're just not going to offend anybody. We're an art company. We're trying to make things that people want to play, and we want as few people offended by our work as possible. But when you're talking about player groups, it's self-selecting, right? You join that group, and they're not the only one. You have a marketplace of ideas. If we want to extend the metaphor there, if you don't like this group, you leave it. And if they're offensive to you, that's a reason to not like being with them.
Right. Well, we'll see how the first transgender black woman does in Call of Duty. I'm sorry, transgender, lesbian, whatever the fuck, Call of Duty World War II, Army, whatever the fuck she is.
Right.
It's a thing, I guess.
I mean, that could be great. I'll hold my breath, though. Probably have a lot of free time.
Yeah, she'll be the only one there, except she'll be like probably played by everyone, so it's gonna be awesome.
Well, so much of this sort of boils down to the reflexive attack on groups that are self-selecting, as you pointed out there. And what makes it even sort of more annoying is that they create groups by themselves with, let's say, charters which say how you can act and how you don't act. And they might actually be more envious of groups which are a little bit more organic and perhaps competition orientated. And this is also a way that they can sort of get back at people. It's like, you actually have fun while gaming? You can't do that. That's wrong. Might offend someone.
So
You're hurting on the game.
We were talking about this earlier. There's so in EVE we have long-term communities inside the game, right? And those are primary groups of friends, and they'll play other games together. But in the end, it always still revolves around EVE. Inside of EVE, though, there are other groups that do this with a lot of games, and they actually have many hundred members groups, and they've been around for a decade plus. Some of these groups that I know of. And they are actual gaming communities unto themselves, and they do have very long lists of rules that they adhere to about membership and what you're expected to do and how you're expected to treat people. And they take a really dim view of a lot of this stuff, just on an interpersonal level. But it's not anything specific to sexual violence or feminism or anything like that. It's just it all boils down to don't be a dick to anyone here, because we're all here to just have fun playing games. And they have people of all ages and genders and stuff, and spouses and girlfriends play with them too. So you've got to be a little bit on a better behavior. And part of the benefit you get to giving up a lot of that freedom is you always have a group of people you can trust, which is huge in a lot of games, especially most MMOs.
Absolutely. I actually totally, I am on board with that. The thing which this article is doing, though, is trying to conflate a long-standing group who knows what it wants
exactly
with just gamers in general. Like, if you're going to jump into any game where the major population is between, let's say, 10 and 16, you know what you're getting in for. And if you're going with college-age people, you know what you're getting in for, too. And so to say that you can make groups, that's a good thing. To say that your group isn't the way that we want your group to be, which is what this article is doing, is dumb.
Yep. No, and that's the thing. And making something the way you want to do. I don't know. I was listening to the podcast from the Thinkery last night, which touched on this as well, with the complaint about D&D's racial makeup and how they're treating of black characters in the game. And they were just like, who the hell plays official canon stuff from Wizards of the Coast? Everyone does homebrew. Who are these people? They're not really playing D&D. And I was like, oh, that's a really good point. And my question is, who finds these guilds where people are rampantly, misogynistic or talk about rape constantly, or all of the things they mentioned? Who finds these places and didn't know what they were getting into? Because I can tell you who those guys are in every game I've played. They're generally really elitist assholes who are pretty good at the game, or have people who are very good at the game who lead a bunch of people who think they're good at the game and aren't that great, but they follow orders well, and they do their own little shit pile, and you generally can ignore them or go beat the hell out of them. That's what you do with assholes, right?
Well, the other thing is it's escapism. If people can, take a part of themselves where they want to be a bit of a jerk and actually put it into a make-believe world and work through that in that world, that's an awesome coping mechanism. That's actually a really good thing. And yet people will say that's terrible. There's a bunch of frustration. Do you guys know the YouTuber Arch Warhammer?
Name sounds familiar, but I don't remember from where.
He's currently on the warpath about how Games Workshop is being sort of attacked again over the fact that a game which involves plastic models that you can shape and build any way you want, paint any color you want, is inherently misogynistic. And it's like, how does that work? It's make what you play. If you want to make them look a certain way, do it.
Yeah, this. I guess tabletop gaming is the next battleground we're gonna have to fight over, because this is becoming a thing now, I guess. But it is, if you are creating the content, if you have player-run games, especially when most of them are homebrew, most of them are designed by the people playing them. The rulebook is just the structure you have, so everyone doesn't have to go over all the rules every time.
Mm-hmm.
Who is hot miking?
I think it's Ryan.
No, that's not me.
Crow?
Crow
What's hot miking?
means we're hearing a whole bunch of stuff coming through your mic that you did not intend.
Sounds like a daycare.
Well, let me try.
Now, with that sort of
Nope,
thing, as
alright.
well,
It's not me.
Well, you wouldn't necessarily know.
Yeah.
No, because I'm hearing the background.
I think it is him.
Oh well, moving on.
Moving on.
It's gone now.
Just say that's why I think it's him.
yeah.
I'm
Quick
sorry,
question though,
continue.
guys. Out of everyone who's here, how many people do tabletop gaming and are into that sort of thing?
No.
I mean, define how often are you talking? I don't do it often.
But you do play, so it's actually something that you would do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a weekly D&D game too.
Now, how would you guys sort of form your rules for who's going to show up? Because I would assume, like Lex was saying earlier, that if you're going to join a group which you know is hardcore, and okay, let's throw out here, hardcore plus BDSM Dungeons and Dragons, if you don't
Alright.
like the BDSM aspect, you really need to get out of there before you go into the door.
Right?
Okay. fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely know what you're getting yourself into because it's not a. It's a very. I mean, you can literally pick up and join, but if you're not into, if you don't know what's going on, it's gonna be really weird to be like, oh, by the way, you're gonna be here. Throw this die. You do this. It's. I mean, it's not a. Move your cursor here. It's a make a decision, roll a die, see what happens, add points, whatever. So I mean, it is pretty different. I guess if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's no way to just drop in like for a session, right? You're gonna have a commitment to playing it more often than not. I mean, obviously there's board games, which are sort of a different category, but in general,
Right.
unless you are a really experienced player, you're not just gonna be like, oh, I'm just gonna come for a session or two and guest in, which is a thing, but it's obviously not a thing that you're gonna do with a random or many random groups without.
No, that's fair. I mean, if you get in, you're like kind of screwing everyone else over because they don't know you, you don't know them. You're like, I'm gonna observe and follow that guy and.
No, I mean,
try to
like,
do
so in
stuff.
our game, when we have people who want to come see how it is, like we give them a player sheet with a character, like an NPC basically, and they play it through with that. And it works really well with people who know D&D, and they add something to the story, even if they can't commit to a every week thing. And the people that don't, it's a good way to introduce them. But we know when they're coming in, like, oh, this is your first time. Cool. Well, this is what you're going to play, and here's what you can do. And we walk them through the options. And that's fun just because getting new people playing stuff that you're interested in is, as one of my friends put it, there's nothing like watching someone play through D&D their first time. And I think that's true. That is true for any complex game that takes some, imagination or mastery. It's just a good thing to see.
Well, it also speaks to the fact that the claim that something is toxic has become a self-referential ad hominem. So when someone goes, that's a toxic community, it's like, well, why did they kick you out?
Because they're
Right.
toxic, duh.
That's
Yeah, but if your teammates consistently suck, it might not be your teammates.
I always love that label because I hail from one of the legitimately first branded toxic communities and a group that consistently ranks as one of the worst communities in MMO. Also, corollary, you will note that anytime somebody appears on a list of most toxic communities, you will be able to easily find a correlating list of them being the best communities as well. Because they generally tend to close around each other and they take care of their own. And even if you are, a 2-month player in EVE, if you speak up in any community group and say, hey, I'm having life issues, I need some help, you're going to have 20 people who are like, what can we do? And they're going to find a way to help you. It is one of those things that's really unique to see in gaming versus other entertainment media. You can't just go to the movies and be like, I'm getting a divorce. Does anyone want to chat for a while?
Quick
Wow.
question there, guys. So Crow and Ryan, do you have any topics you want to bring up? You've been quiet for a while.
Yeah, I wasn't interested in these topics, but anyone want to spitball some things? Because I'm not sure.
That's fine.
Honestly, I have no idea.
Huh.
Crow, did you have an idea?
There's not much that happened this week, though.
Yeah, not much happened this week.
We haven't talked about it, right?
Yeah,
everything has been discussed.
Yeah, pretty much everything. Yeah.
I don't know about everything.
It's not by me.
I mean, we can talk about the latest suicide bombing in Kabul.
No.
Okay, a suicide bomber happened. Basically, the world's getting less violent. Like, that's one thing we talk about: the mismatch between the facts and reality, and the perception. Mismatch between facts and reality when it comes to violence in the world. Turns out 56% of Americans assume that violent crime has gotten worse in the last 20 years, even though the exact opposite happened. It's weird.
Well, I think there's a lot of that. It's the per capita versus the raw numbers. So, like, raw numbers, violence has, of course, gone up because population continues to go up and we have better record keeping of all of it, too. But per capita, obviously, it's been a steady decline, not just in the Western world, but pretty much globally as far as we can tell. Yep. Obviously, it's hard to tell when you have places that have really bad record keeping, but everywhere had bad record keeping, 150 years ago, so it probably all balances out. But we also have better record, like the recording and record keeping of it is so much easier to disseminate now.
Yeah.
It's exciting. That's why news stations have to cover it all.
Well, for anyone who's interested, there's a book by Steven Pinker called The Angels of Our Better Nature, which actually looks at this over basically the last 60 years. And he got into a lot of trouble from the media over it because he's like, well, actually, the intensification of the violence narrative is totally on you guys. It's not reflective of the world.
Yep.
Triggered.
And the media just got pissed at him for saying that. It's the same thing with guns. There are more guns than ever. Gun laws have weakened since the 90s. We see that millions of people have built their own guns with parts that you can easily buy online with no background checks whatsoever. And yet the violent crime rate has plummeted. So,
well, in Mexico, one of the I think it's MS-13. Their signature weapon is the pipe shotgun. It's a pipe with a nail as the striker pin, and they put a shotgun shell in it.
Yeah.
And then they shoot people.
Exactly.
That is ridiculously
Turns out
crazy.
It's very easy to make guns. It's very easy to make guns.
That's funny that you say that because it's crazy how people just yell about how much they want the laws changed when they know nothing about the guns.
Exactly. Making an AK-47 is so fucking easy.
And will probably get easier over the years. That's the really
3D printing, hooray!
3D printers! Oh, yeah!
It's not even just 3D printers. It's the affordability of like an auto CNC machine now is retardedly low. Like if you have any interest in gunsmithing, this is probably the best time to have ever gotten into it in your life.
Yep.
That is.
Well, I'm gonna find out how much is a CNC machine. We're gonna look this up.
You can easily buy one for a couple $100 on eBay.
$3,000. Depends what you want.
Yeah,
totally
buy one for like looks like $500 for a
right. So for less than the cost of a good gun, like if you're really like desperate to get a firearm, I don't advise this though, it is legal. You can mill your own gun. Plenty of plans online, and go do whatever you're gonna do that precludes you from buying one legally. And that's not something we can ever hope to stop. That's like trying to stop growing pot. It's like, well, in theory, you could do it if we allowed the government to literally search every home and computer in existence. We might get 90% of them.
One of the things which I always try and bring up, because I'm here in Canada, I'm not in the States. We have relatively low gun violence as well. And what I try to point to is the fact that the amount of guns and the amount of regulation actually doesn't seem to be causative in any way to gun-related crime. However, the amount of education available to people about the firearms which they purchase seems to be directly causal to the decline of firearm misuse. And so it's like, teach people about the dangerous thing, and suddenly it's not as dangerous anymore.
Yeah, true.
That doesn't make sense to me.
I mean, that's the thing. When you look at gun violence, and this is why they always conflate gun violence with
gun deaths.
Homicide and offensive things, because suicide by gun is still gun violence.
Well, 2/3 of gun deaths are suicide, but Let's not talk about that.
Well, I got into this. I think it was Sandy Hook. I got into this debate pretty hard with a good friend of mine, and he's a good enough friend that he was willing to hear both sides of it. And one of his chick friends, she posted that we needed to outlaw automatic weapons after Sandy Hook, and I'm like, automatic weapons have been illegal since the 20s. So,
Well,
congrats,
80s.
we're done.
80s, really.
Yeah, since the 80s.
They became regulated in the 20s and have been extremely hard to procure from that point on. So
You can easily make an AK-47. It's not that hard.
you can, but you can't go out and just buy one at a store, right? And that's what they were arguing for, because they thought that an AR-15 was a fully automatic. It was the military version. That was their mistake. And I was like, there's no such thing as an assault weapon. Here's what you have said incorrectly in this post, which was 90% of the post. If you want to outlaw these weapons, great. This is a semi-automatic hunting rifle. And if you want to outlaw that, cool, let's have that debate. And then they came back and they were like, 30,000 people die. And I'm like, actually, it's more like 10,000 people that are killed by firearms. And you're more likely to die in an auto crash by almost a factor of 2. Would you like to ban cars?
There's a lot of confusion around the terminology as well, and that's what I
would
always
like to
find
ban
hard to fight
ethanol.
against. Go ahead, Crow.
Basically, when it comes to gun deaths, a lot of people want to ban the big, scary rifles and basically the big guns. And yet, you're more likely to get killed by someone using their hands and feet than any rifle of any kind. It's ridiculous. So people keep saying they want to ban the big guns, even though the vast majority of the homicides occur with handguns, which no one wants to ban. It's weird.
Well, I mean, municipalities wanted to ban them. Then that's been one of those.
But the vast majority of Americans don't.
Right, yeah, because handguns are for personal protection, and most people are perfectly okay with having a gun for personal protection. So, that's the irony. A hunting rifle is not really a very good self-defense weapon, unless you have someone at range, right? You're much better off in your house having a sturdy knife with a good blade than you are with a long rifle, right? Because you just don't have the distance you need to work with that. Handgun is pretty effective. Shotgun even better.
Something like that, sure.
Everyone should learn a
Still outlaws all
song.
We have about 8 minutes left there, guys. Is there any other topics we want to bring up?
Can we talk about how the renewable fuel standard needs to go away, but for some reason the EPA is kind of recommitting to it?
What exactly are you talking about?
The renewable fuel standard requires that X amount of your gasoline needs to be ethanol.
Oh my god.
And,
The actual carbon producing fuel.
Ethanol is so fucking stupid.
It is, just because the energy required to produce it actually ends up producing more greenhouse gas.
Yeah, and also it leaves all kinds of garbage in your engine and stuff. I hate the stuff.
Yeah. I mean, so that's the thing though. Trump is in this weird spot where he doesn't really control the EPA because it's so filled with bureaucrats, and this is going to be most large entities. So there's only so much stuff he can pull forward, and the timetables are not going to be on his side for at least his first term. And if he gets a second one, which is, I think, still pretty debatable, but then maybe we'd see a lot more progress on some of the infrastructural stuff.
I'm guessing that he will only get a second term if some of the big legislative stuff comes through in a reasonable time frame here within the next 6 months to a year. Otherwise, I think Congress is going to go back to the Dems, and so will the presidency.
I think if Congress goes back to the Dems, I think Trump has an easier time getting a second term, because then he can argue obstructionism, which will be accurate. If Dems win Congress, nothing happens for 2 years. So I hesitate to think that's actually going to happen. Strategic voting has become a really. What was that?
So he'll get impeached, though. Oh no.
I mean, they still need the seats they need. The burden of proof is pretty high for impeachment as far as how many senators they need to get.
I think it's 3/4, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think unless there was a complete landslide, if every Republican seat switched, they might get close to that, close enough to swing a few, but it's him actually getting found guilty and removed from office is still so slim without some actual crime. If he actually is found to have committed something worthy of impeachment, it's instant. But just on the political of it, no. I don't even think most Democrats want to open that can of worms to really get into that kind of fight. Because if it's just impeaching a guy you don't like, they're going to be on the wrong end of that stick in not too long anyways.
Yeah.
That's really what
No
it
one
is.
just get Pence. Wouldn't that be great?
I'm still trying to figure out the segue here. So we go from the EPA to Trump being impeached. Are they so tightly connected?
We're segueing as well as the inventor of the segue.
It's the way the executive branch works, in that Trump is fighting against both Democrats that Obama put into place and the Bush era people. So literally everybody who was appointed before Trump took office is like, no, this guy is not with us and we don't want to help him in any way. So that's a lot of career bureaucrats who are just like, I'm just going to keep doing my thing. And no, I don't like you.
I would like if Rick Scott could, was it Scott or Perry? Which one runs the Department of Energy?
That one's
Perry.
Yeah.
There's so many Republican Ricks that were governors.
Oh no, Rick.
Yeah, so Rick Perry needs to just shutter the Department of Energy like he said he wanted to in 2008.
Yeah, we'll see if that happens.
Be interesting.
Can the president just fire everyone in these departments and just leave us alone?
He could, but then you're leaving a lot of like various stuff that's going unchecked. So it's like.
So this is the big danger from the media sort of tar and feathering of Trump, is that he legitimately is having a hard time actually hiring people because there are so many people who don't want to go into his administration. Like, they don't want it on their resume that they went to work for Trump. So, like, the State Department is just chronically understaffed right now, which I guess is in my mind, is kind of a net positive, but maybe not so much, right?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, if the ATF, the Department of Education, the Department of Commerce, the Department of basically everything, if the entire executive branch is understaffed, I'm happy.
Right, like, that's the thing. They don't get to pick and choose, like, where they're understaffed, right? Like, it's just who's...
They could if they started shuttering departments and shifting people around.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Appointees.
Like, who was it? I think it was Ben Shapiro or somebody who said, you're not essential, or if you can be laid off during a government shutdown, you are obviously not essential staff, and your position should just be eliminated anyways. I was I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with that.
Right? Like, I can live with that policy. Like, if you are not so vital that we need you while the government doesn't have a budget, your job isn't that important.
Yep.
I'm triggered now. You just
Abolish the ATF.
I could get behind that.
Abolish,
I don't
drain
actually
the
know
alphabet
enough to-
soup.
Sorry, go ahead, Phil.
I was just saying, drain the alphabet soup.
Yeah, the EPA, the BPA, the XYZ, LGBTQAIP, whatever, everything's gone.
You missed a few letters there, but all right.
I don't know. There's just so many fucking letters.
All right,
And characters.
are we done?
I think we are wrapping up, guys. It's been
All
a good episode. If I can find the button to stop here. All right, guys. Thank you for watching, everybody. This is us signing off.
Ciao.
See ya.